Welcome back to the 99, where we are focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I'm your host, Patrick Marlett, and today we'll be talking about the tiniest of bones. Oh, they're so small. Guys, if you haven't caught up with my weekly reviews of Core Set 2021, well, guess what? It's all done. Seth's been spoiled, and right on its coattails came Jumpstart. What the hell is that, you might be asking? Well, let me refresh your memory. It's a set of cards, a lot of reprints, couple of new ones, and a boatload of legendary creatures, and a handful of new cards that are really fantastic in Commander, wouldn't you know it? There was so many cards spoiled. Well, I'm going to save that for tomorrow's video. I think that's how this is going to work out. I'm filming this pretty much 24 hours after Tinybones release, because I spent so much time putting this one together. That's only half true. I've done so many takes on Mono Black Discard, a mass discard build, and it was only up until this point that I'd lost all hope. And then Tinybones Trinket Thief found his way into my heart. Tinybones Trinket Thief is 1 generic, 1 black, legendary creature, skeleton rogue, 1/2 body. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. But that's not all Tinybones does. He also has an overcosted activated ability that we will be leveraging, as a matter of fact. 4 generic, double black. Each opponent with no cards in hand loses 10 life. Ooh, mass discard, Hellbent Pat, and infinite mana? Well, you're close. We're not going to go the infinite mana route. We could, and we'll talk about that, but I don't think it's for this particular list. But guys, in case you're wondering what I'm looking at, I have my laptop off to the side with the written primer. So in case you want to follow along with the visual primer, you can do so by following the link in the description over to Moxfield. And Tinybones, guys, a lot of these Jumpstart reprints and cards, very expensive. Hold off. I'm seeing $60 for Tinybones thus far, and there are no foils from this set. So that's 60 regular bones for a regular non-foil. But if you insist, I will encourage you to pick up your next singles, packs, and more from TCG Player. Don't skip this part, it's very important. Guys, if you want to help the channel indirectly, the best way to do so is to just buy your cards through the link in the description. If you like purchasing singles and packs like I do, buy them through TCG Player, guys. The best prices globally. I don't know about that. I can't verify. But some of the best prices stateside. So if you want to help yourself, help the channel out, that's the best way to do so. And if you want to help us directly, you can do so via Anchor, the station you'll be listening to this on, and or Patreon. And as our Patreon members know, I'll be doing a special thanks to all of you at the end of this video up until we reach 99. And we're getting so much closer, boys and girls, so much closer. It makes me excited thinking about it, because all of your help to support this channel really helps me out a lot. So thank you so much. Also, by the way, guys, in case you didn't know, I do weekly messages on Patreon. I've been talking about how we do pickup games over on the Discord. So if you're not a member of the Discord and you're a Patreon member, please do join the Discord. That is where all of the pickup games are placed. So if you do want to check out some of these lists as I go about testing them, that's the best way to find out what I'm currently brewing. Now, let's jump into this video. Tinybones is a lot to handle. Mass discard is a very difficult strategy to accomplish, because in most scenarios, your commander doesn't help you with breaking symmetry. That is, when you discard cards massively, you're usually in the same boat as everyone else. However, Tinybones' first ability puts you a step above everyone else. So obviously the discard component is the most important component of this deck plan, and it's what I want to cover first and foremost here. I do want to preface all of this by stating, no, there are no infinite combos here, and yes, while you are accustomed to seeing me discuss competitive list, it's odd to talk about one that doesn't have some standard A plus B combo in there. And while there are combos, they're not necessarily infinite combos. What you want to do is play a game of attrition with your opponents. Remove them of their combo packages, remove them of any of their strategies. Basically keep them hellbent by making them discard. And we've got 2 ways of doing that. There is the mass discard, which I've been talking about, and the thing we're going to talk about first and foremost here is singular target discard. And the first card up on the list is Blackmail. Yes, you've heard of it. I'm positive everyone's using it. No one touches this card. And with good reason, because it's limited in its scope. However, look at what the deck's doing. Blackmail reads, for 1 swamp, sorcery speed, target player reveals 3 cards from his or her hand, and you choose one of them. That player discards that card. Now, this is much better mid-game to late when the options are limited. At a certain point, you will see value pieces from your opponent's hand, and what those might be are really based on the mindset of that player. They could want you to just choose their removal at this point. They could want you to choose their win con at this point because they might have a form of recovery they're hiding behind. The thing is, it's going to depend game to game. You're not always going to hit a player when they have just 3 cards in hand, but you'll be damn close every single time. And the thing is, this has no limitations as to what you can make them discard. So generally speaking, what I found with mass discard strategies is folks will get rid of the resources they feel are least necessary. And generally speaking, those are lands, oddly enough. And with competitive commander, the CMC averages of most decks fit within that 1.8 to 2.6 average territory. And that is to include your land base. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic of these singular target removal cards, but most important to note about blackmail, you can hit anything. So if you want to remove one of the lands from their hand, you can. Generally speaking, with these single target removals, you're going to want to aim for their clasms, that is Pyroclasm, Whip Flare, anything that's going to damage out the entire board. Not that we have a lot of creatures, but those are likely going to be the options that they use to remove your 1/2 Tinybones. So pick the player that's in red or black to remove their Toxic Deluge, their Pyroclasm, so on and so forth. Blackmail, maybe not the best card for it. However, it scales and it gets better. I would say that this is a toss-up for Myers Toll. I believe I left it in the consideration board for this list. You can look over that card later. I'll probably leave it on the screen for you anyways. The next card we want to talk about, and you're going to notice a common thread here. A lot of the single target removal or discard cards are at sorcery speed, which kind of sucks. I don't know why they haven't graduated to instant speed yet. I mean, we've had single target, discard for such a long time, and it's always been sorcery speed. Maybe that's to keep it fair? I don't know. However, Chain of Smaug. 1 generic, 1 black for a sorcery speed card. Target player discards 2 cards from his or her hand. That player may copy the spell and may choose a new target for that copy. Whoo! I'm not gonna lie to you. This might be the easiest way to get the board hell-bent. It really depends on the mood of your table. But as soon as one person decides they want to copy it, the cascade happens right then and there. That is, if people don't find Tinybones to be a big enough threat. And in most scenarios, mono black, unless it's cEDH, people don't freak out as horribly. And maybe they will start to once that $60 rare hits the battlefield. Mythic rare? Is Tinybones? Mythic rare. The boy's mythic rare. That's why it's 60. So Chain of Smaug, it's fantastic. You can keep doing it if you don't have cards to discard, right? So target player, if you don't have cards to discard, you discard up to 2, whatever you had left in your hand, but you can decide to copy it, and you can do this indefinitely. Obviously, rules dictate that once everyone's out of a hand, you can't continue to do this, but it's important to note that Chain of Smaug will allow you to copy it despite having no cards in hand. So far as I understand, if there's a judge out there, corrects me. But that's how I've seen it played. Chain of Smaug, fantastic. That's how I play it. It's so good. It's so good. Is it a Chain of Vapor? Not really, but it's pretty damn good at getting everyone hellbent. Make sure you play Tinybones first. Shouldn't have to say that. Every time we talk about a discard card, make sure Tinybones is on the field first. Your plan A should be a turn 1 Tinybones. Not difficult to do. Turn 2 if the hand's really good, right? You don't want to go... We're going to take a little stop here. With Tinybones, any mass discard list, but particularly this one, because of the nature of the deck, you are always going to be down on cards, especially when you get into the mass discard territory. Tinybones is your answer to breaking that symmetry, because you get to draw a card every time someone discards a card, obviously. You don't want to mulligan down to 4 cards. This is not the deck that you mulligan aggressively with. There's enough of a redundancy here in discard effects and turn 1 plays for Tiny that if you don't get there, it's okay. But if you have to go down to 6, that's probably where I'll stop. Unless that hand's completely unusable, stop with 6 cards left in your hand. Cry of Contrition. Black, sorcery speed, target player discards a card. We take what we can get. Oh no, there's more. Haunt. What the hell is Haunt? Okay, when this spell card is put into a graveyard after resolving, remove it from the game, haunting target creature. So it goes to your graveyard, trigger, and then it goes away. So it's a trigger. You can do stuff in response. You have priority. But depending on the board straight, I'm thinking of Draneth Magistrate. Okay, that's why I said that. I'm not crazy. You're going to want to haunt the Draneth Magistrate. Why? Everyone wants to remove Draneth Magistrate. Trust me. Tinybones probably came out before Draneth Magistrate. We hope. We really hope. And even if he didn't, put this on the Draneth Magistrate. Because trust me, whatever the priority target is for the board, place it on that thing. Because when the creature, Cry of Contrition is haunting, is put into a graveyard, target player discards a card. It doesn't have to be the player that controls the creature that's being haunted. So the Draneth Magistrate might be this opponent's creature, but I can make that person discard, right? He might have the edge. I don't know what he did. Whatever. He drew a bunch of cards on his turn. I don't like him. Don't be petty. Target the right opponent, but they get to choose. Now, there's only so many single target discard cards I've left in here that give them the choice, but this one's good because you can't trip twice. Duress. Everyone knows this one. It's kind of a staple. Inquisition of Kozilek, Thoughtseize. Those are the common ones. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. So every time you play one of these cards, and there are 10 of them, a majority of these will allow you the information of knowing what that opponent has, right? So this is fantastic for you because you know how to react to their plays and or interact with them moving forward. But furthermore, if you duress one person, I'm not saying this to be nice. It just makes sense to Inquisition of Kozilek the next person, and so on and so forth. So you can get a read on what the board has for you. But obviously prioritize the fast combo decks and the ones that might have removal for you. Because Tinybones, trust me, once they see that Tinybones is a true menace, they're going to wish they put way more creature removal into their list. Because if you get them hellbent and you have 5 cards in your hand still for some odd reason, because of Tinybones, they're going to hate you. Inquisition of Kozilek. 1 black, sorcery speed. I don't think I mentioned it. Duress is sorcery. Target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it with a converted mana cost of 3 or less. That player discards that card. It's the abrupt decay of single target discard. Is it a bad card? No, because what we were just talking about earlier, every average CMC is of a competitive list is going to be generally under that 3 mark. And most of the things you're going to want to remove are 3 CMC and under. Like, I don't know, a Guild Drake that might be primed to steal your Tinybones. That would be stupid if they just get to play your deck strategy while you play the discard cards. Get rid of the Guild Drake with Inquisition of Kozilek. There's plenty of targets that this will want to hit. You know your opponent's list. You know the staples at this point. If you watch the show at all, you know the staples. Go ahead, target them, and remove that crap. You don't want to deal with it. Mind Rake. I am going to put it on the screen. But I'll read it. 2 generic, 1 black, sorcery. Target player discards 2 cards. You don't want to play it for that. Moving on. Raven's Crime. 1 black, sorcery speed. Target player discards a card and retrace. This is foreign to you. You play Ren and 6, right? You've never ultimate with Ren and 6? Neither have I. Retrace. Retrace allows you to cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card rather, in addition to paying its other cost. So Raven's Crime is in a unique position for this list because we are in mono black and we do utilize cards like Necropotence and Ad Nauseam. We could even use a card called Necrologia, which I also think I left in our consideration board. Those should all be on the screen, but you likely know them. You put cards in your hand. They are very, very good for any strategy, but particularly this one because you'll be fueling your hand with a bunch of lands and you could repeatedly cast this card to get those players hellbent. It is a micro strategy within the list, but an excellent repeatable spell for you to play. And do note, this doesn't go into exile or something crazy after you have retraced it. You simply are fueling your graveyard and have this card there still. Next up on this list is Thoughtseize. This is what would arguably best single target removal for the list. 1 black, sorcery. Target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards the card and you lose 2 life. We're not fond of losing life in this deck too much because we only have, I think, 8 creatures as the deck is currently with Tinybones and not that many ways to block our life total. So, and we do need our life for a majority of the packages here. Ad nos Necropotence. So we don't like the life loss, but the fact that we can just remove pretty much everything from our opponent is fantastic. Okay, this is no blackmail. You can't touch their lands. It'll be very rare that you'll want to remove their lands. Trust me. Like, there's no land that scares me that much that you'll want to remove. This list uses Tabernacle, so what are we really scared about? I can't honestly tell you. Tell me the land you're scared about. Funeral Charm. Okay, so this is where things get interesting. We have 2 cards that can operate at instant speed. This one's actually true instant speed. Funeral Charm is 1 black, instant speed. Choose 1, target player discards a card. Boom! Got him! Draw off your turn. Yes, because it's at the beginning of each end step. And you have 2 other modes. These are actually good. Or target creature gets +2/-1 until the end of turn. So you can make Tinybones a 3/1. If push comes to shove and you need to remove that target and they just keep swinging at you, trade up, recast Tinybones. For CMC, not that bad. Also, target creature gains Swamp Walk until the end of turn. There are things you can do with this that don't necessarily pertain to this particular deck build, but the Swamp Walk is relevant. Not too vital here. I would say 90% of the time, you're going to make the player discard a card. 10% of the time, you'll do the second mode. Lastly, we have Necrogen Spellbomb. Been looking for an excuse to use this one. 1 generic artifact. Pay a black and sacrifice Necrogen Spellbomb. Target player discards a card from his or her hand. Or 1 generic, sacrifice Necrogen Spellbomb, draw a card. Never. Just promise me never that you will never use the second ability of this card. Just don't do it. Why? Are you really asking me that? Because the first effect, if Tinybones is out, discard a card. I draw a card. You cantrip still. You still draw the card. Always use the first ability. Only desperate times will call for you to sacrifice this to draw a card solely. Anyways, moving on to mass discard. Oh, I know all these cards all too well. I had a Liliana Heretical Healer deck a while ago, and I still own all the cards, and they composed like 80% of this list because the strategy is all the same, except the commander is so much better for it. Liliana of the Vale. Oh, it's the queen of discard, boys and girls. 1 generic, double black, planeswalker Liliana. She comes in with 3 loyalty counters. Whoop-de-doo. +1, each player discards a card. Psh, psh. All I had to say. -2, target player sacrifices a creature. There's more. I'm going to go on. I don't really need to read this last one because you'll never do it. But -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents into in the pile of their choice. Sacrifice all permanents in the pile. You're never going to do this ultimate. Sorry, if you can hear that loud motorcycle outside, excuse it. Excuse that person. But the -6 isn't all too important here. It's really just the discard and the sacrifice creature every now and then. We have a few utilities to kill creatures that might be maiming us, and she will take care of the rest of them. Burglar Rat. 1 generic, 1 black, creature rat, 1/1. Whenever Burglar Rat enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. It's asymmetrical discard. Don't have to say much else about that. It's also a body that blocks. And honestly, with a mass discard list, everything on a creature that says everyone discards, that's a reanimate target. As silly as that sounds, it keeps your ad nos, life loss low, and you're getting everyone hellbent. You want it. Mindlash Sliver. Another creature for a black, a creature sliver. Who would have guessed? 1/1 body. All slivers have, this sliver has, 1 generic, sacrifice this creature. Each player discards a card. Now, the difference between this and Burglar Rat is that it's symmetrical and not asymmetrical. Secondly, You can do this on other players' turns. It doesn't operate at sorcery speed, so you can sacrifice this, have the player discard a card, and net that card draw off of another player's turn if you already got the cantrip on your turn, right? Obviously, don't limit the amount of times you make someone single target discard and or mass discard on your turn if you already get the activation, or rather trigger, from your Tinybones. Read the board, you'll know how much mana you can pump into making that effect happen on your turn. But generally speaking, play it slow, keep your mana base open, play effects like this. Next up is Plague Crafter. 2 generic, 1 black, creature, human shaman, 3/2 body. This is one of the best in the deck, by the way. It's just a better fleshbag marauder. When Plague Crafter enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. He's just going for all of them. You don't have that? How about that? You have none of those things? You got cards in your hand? I'll take cards in your hand. So good. Plague Crafter generally sacrifices himself. You don't really have anything in this list that benefits from leaving the battlefield. We don't have some crazy Protean Hulk nonsense strategy package packed in here. It's just Plague Crafter. And he is going to make himself die, and then ideally make everyone else discard, and or just eliminate creatures off the board. Wrinkle, Master of Pranks. We talked about this guy before. Never built a list for him. I know a lot of people did. Let me know how that's going, because if you don't like that list, throw him in this one, because he's really good for it. 2 generic, double black, legendary creature, fairy rogue, 3/3 body, flying haste. Bam, do something when he hits. What does he do? Whenever Wrinkle, Master of Pranks, deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. So bad. The wording is so bad here. At any rate, each player discards a card. Or each player loses 1 life and draws a card. Or each player sacrifices a creature. It's like this is the Plague Crafter that went to graduate school. And he earned, high marks, excellent GPA, really smart student. He has options in life, and he's going places with haste and flying. So this is a really good utility. Generally speaking, you're going to use it for that first mode, never really for the second mode, and then ultimately for that third mode if push comes to shove, right? And they just keep swinging at you. Get rid of them with Wrinkle. Arterial Flow. You may have this with the Vampire ability, but 1 generic, double black, sorcery speed. Each opponent discards 2 cards. If you control a vampire, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. What? We're all about incremental damage, right? So if you do have Asylum Visitor out, which we'll talk about later, this is even better. But by itself, 3 mana, make everyone discard 2. You're making them discard 6 cards total, should they have that many left. And it all costs 3 mana. It's pretty good in my book. The only way to one-up that is to make them discard 3 cards. Am I right? I'm right. But this one's a little bit of a flex spot, I'll say. Okay, so moving forward, you might not always want to use this card. Delirium Skeins. 2 generic, 1 black, 1 sorcery card. Each player discards 3 cards. Now, if you're doing the math, you could potentially make everyone discard a total of 12 cards from the board for 3 mana. That's better than Arterial Flow, right? Well, it's you two, and you're going to want to be ahead of the game at this point. Because I can see Delirium Skeins hitting someone that has 2 cards in hand, 2 cards in hand, and then 3 cards ultimately, right? This person's smart. They don't want to be hell-bent, so they take the 10 damage, whatever. But this is going to hurt you a lot. So I will state that this is probably the first thing I'm going to swap out moving forward. It looks like the strongest discard, and it is, but it's also the weakest in the fact that you are losing 3 cards, plus this one. So you're 4 cards down in hand from wherever you were. It's a rough spot, and we don't have that many, reanimate targets that we really are aiming for. Just one, which we'll talk about, but Delirium Skeins is one that's very much a double-edged sword, and certainly the first mass discard to be replaced moving forward. So in case you're playing off of this list, bear that in mind. Mind Rake. Didn't we just... Okay, so It has an overload. It's on the screen. You may cast this spell for its overload cost. If you do, change the text by replacing all instances of target with each. So for 2 mana, everyone discards 2 cards. This I can live with. See, now this to me is acceptable. For the cost and the effectiveness of this card, it's a better Delirium Schemes. I'm okay with leaving you with 1 card in your hand, but it's those other 2 that I'm dissatisfied with. Also, again, this leaves you in a slightly better place than you were before, and obviously you're up a card after this if Tinybones sticks. I like Mindbreak a lot, especially at 2 mana. I wouldn't necessarily use it for its regular cast, but I would definitely overload it. Siphon Mind. This is probably low on my list of mass discards as well because of its cost and the fact that Ad Nauseam makes you take 4 damage for it. But 3 generic, 1 black for sorcery speed card, Siphon Mind. Each other player discards a card. You draw a card for each card discarded this way. So obviously you're going to have cards, your opponents rather are going to have cards for them to discard for you to draw. You could potentially draw 4 cards at the end of your turn, right? So Tinybones and this for 4 mana. They seem to equate well to one another. I think Siphon Mind is great. It's certainly a step above a lot of the other mass discards, but the cost is what gets me. Still extremely good and a staple for the list. Vicious Rumors. I love this card. 1 black, sorcery speed. Vicious Rumors deals 1 damage to each opponent. Okay. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Okay. Anything else? Oh, you gain 1 life. Why not? Why not gain 1 life? So turn 1, Dark Ritual into Tinybones into this. You're in a good spot, my friends. Vicious Rumors is fantastic. It's asymmetrical, and you just benefit. You just benefit all over for 1 mana. It's what you would call a pushed card. And I absolutely love this card in this list. Liliana's Triumph. You know, there's not that much mass asymmetrical removal in mono black, right? We're still on Toxic Deluge for this list, but this is fantastic for picking apart your opponent's board state. For 1 generic and 1 black, instant speed, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Pretty solid. If you have Liliana of the Vale out, each opponent also discards a card. I like it. I like it a lot. It's not always, I mean, it's 1 of 99 cards, right, Liliana, and then this is another 1 of 99 cards. It's not always going to make people discard, but if it does, it's just that added benefit. You know, if this was 2 generic and 1 black, we wouldn't be running it. Let's put it that way. The next card I'm going to talk about is an absolute essential in any mass discard build because it has the word discard on it. Yes, you give your opponents options by playing this, but 2 generic for Anvil of Bogarden. Each player skips his or her discard phase. So it's like they have Reliquary Tower in their land base at all times. Kind of cool. During each player's draw phase, that player draws an additional card and then chooses and discards a card. So this can be bad for other reanimator strategies are on the board, right? You're giving them that free discard, but we want every cost-effective at the beginning discard a card in our deck, right? So anytime we can make our opponents discard a card off turn, we're drawing a card. So they might get options, but if this sticks and Tinybones is still around, I draw a card, I draw a card, I draw a card without even thinking. I'm up 3 cards. And so what? They got to see an additional card on their turn. They also had the downside of discarding a card from their hand. Anvil of Bogarden, I would say it's like a double-edged sword, but the blade point that's facing you is very blunt. It might hit you, but it's not going to hurt that bad. This end, though, this is the end where you're drawing cards, is going to hurt a lot. It's really good. We have 2 more effects that are just like this. The only one we avoided is Gibbering Descent. I still wouldn't recommend it, but look that one up. This one is Bottomless Pit. 1 generic, double black, each enchantment. During each player's upkeep, that player discards a card at random. Fantastic. If you have a Mana Crypt and 1 Swamp, Necrogen Mist is even better. It's literally the same card, except they choose what they're discarding, right? So Necrogen Mist, it's a slightly worse form of Bottomless Pit. However, it's easier to cast. The sooner we can get these things on the board, the better it is for us. Because, again, anytime we can make someone discard off turn, perfect for us. Words of Waste. 2 generic, 1 black, enchantment. For 1 generic, then next time you would draw a card this turn, each opponent discards a card from his or her hand instead. You can use this off of Tinybones' ability. So, at the beginning of your end step, right? I think that's how it's worded. At the beginning of each end step, you can activate this prior to the draw and then just replace the draw with everyone discarding. It's fantastic. I highly recommend you use Words of Waste. It's a staple in a mass discard build. I wouldn't say you should use this off of Tinybones all the time, unless your hand dictates you should, but this is one of those cards that's going to help you in that war of attrition. Words of Waste is phenomenal in the list. It's only one-upped by one other enchantment in the deck, in my opinion, which we'll talk about later in our payoffs section. But there are 3 more cards we want to discuss. Gyre Reach Sanitarium, it's a land, a legendary land, so it taps for generic and or you can pay 2, tap it, each player draws a card, then discards a card. It's like Anvil of Bogarden, but on a land. You make them discard a card. That's the most important part. You can do this off turn. I would highly recommend you do it at the end of this opponent's turn before your turn rolls around, because you're going to draw another card. It's fantastic. It's a necessary in this list. You're in mono black. You can suffer having 1 land that taps for a generic. Trust me. The next 2 we're going to talk about, not everyone's going to be able to afford this one, along with Tabernacle. And I'll have to say that this card is a non-essential. Like, it's good, right? But it's not crucial. Chains of Mephistopheles. For 1 black, 1 generic and 1 black, I'm going to read the original wording. Because this is the one that people are going to be reading repeatedly as they play against you. Every time a player draws a card, that player must first discard a card from his or her hand. If there are no cards in players' hands, take top card from library and place it in the graveyard instead of drawing. This enchantment does not apply to the first card drawn by a player during the draw phase. So people get confused by this one. I don't blame them. The wording is really odd. And even the revised wording, equally odd. But it does start with the important information first, that your draw is unaffected by this. But if you were to brainstorm, any instance that says draw a card, brainstorm, draw 3 cards, put whatever from your hand, blah, 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 your top of your deck. You first, every instance of a draw, so brainstorm says 3, like draw 3. For the first, second, and third draw, you need to have discarded cards from your hand first. So this is really only going to mess with, a majority of cantrips are blue. So this is really only going to mess with the blue players. Every so often, the guy with the Sensei's Top is going to forget this exists and try to draw a card with Sensei's Top. There are draw effects that are tacked onto other cards in other colors, obviously. And this is going to mess it up severely. Like Sylvan Library, this messes that up severely. And it's all to your benefit because you're always going to be ahead of the game when this is going off. I think the average player will play around this if they know what they're doing, remove it if they're really tired of it, except for the blue player. I mean, enchantments are kind of hard to remove. People don't mainline enchantment removal, and they're lucky if their artifact and enchantment removal works on both, right? Whatever the removal is works on both. Because I feel like we're normally scared of artifacts for some reason, while enchantments are the game-winning component to most decks. Funny thought, isn't it? But Chains of Mephistopheles, I will state, again, it is good in this list, but it's not crucial. Like, you're not going to lose out on the experience if you don't have Chains of Mephistopheles. So don't let this card scare you, and certainly don't let Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale scare you if you're looking over this and you want to try making Tinybones. Okay, fears abated. Go ahead and make the list now. Oppression. 1 generic, double black, enchantment. Whenever a player plays a spell, that's you too, that player discards a card from his or her hand. Oh boy. I've never got this to go a full round around the table. I have never been able to land Oppression and have people say, that's okay. Oppression is, oppressive. It's one of the only stacks elements we run in this list, and it's what I would consider mass discard because it's unavoidable. It's not a particular type of spell. It's just any spell you felt like playing that turn. So it is, again, oppressive. It will get removed, but that's okay. It's good we're letting them waste their removal on something like this instead of one of our payoffs. It's really, if at best it's just bait for the removal, I mean, at worst rather, it's just bait for the removal. At best, it's just game breaking. If they can't remove this and they still want to play a game, it's not like playing into a Rhystic Study or playing into a Mystic Remora, right? This feels awful all around. Very good card, a must play, and not a backbreakingly expensive. So you are, in essence, there are 28, I believe, discard cards I just sang off there. They're all very good. Hopefully you understand how to use them better with my little bit of dialogue on all of them, but I think playing the deck and experiencing it firsthand is the best way to acquire that knowledge, and even just goldfishing it. So feel free to do so over on Moxfield. You're able to do that there. But conceptually, you understand the idea. Get everyone hellbent. This is how you do it. But outside of Tinybones, what other payoffs do we have? What other ways do we have to play this war of attrition? There are actually a lot, and there are a lot more than I've included in this list, right? There are other things that benefit you, like Megrim. You can put Megrim in here. You can put Mindcrank in here. You can put a ton of things in here that synergize well with this list. However, I would say that these are the core synergy cards for the deck and the payoffs I chose to include. Again, you can remove some of the discard utilities and add some of these in if add some other payoffs in if you so choose. But we're all looking for incremental damage for this build. You're just looking to do the damage and then essentially knock them down a peg with Tinybones or knock them down a peg with an enchantment that's in this deck, what we're going to talk about in a second. But the payoffs we want to start with are Asylum Visitor. This is an interesting one because they will have been hellbent at this point for this to be effective, but it's 1 generic, 1 black for a creature, vampire, wizard, 3/1 body, excellent attacker. I'm going to read the second ability first. It has Madness for 1 generic, 1 black. If you saw my Anya Falcon Wrath video, this was in that deck. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I took her out. She was in the original deck. She's good though. She's much better here. Let's just start with that. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Probably wasn't an Anya. But here, it's hyper beneficial because you can essentially make this your discard fodder for that mass discard spell, cast her, and eventually she will start to draw you cards. She's like the opposite of Tinybones. She's the opposite of Tinybones. She kind of plays off both of his abilities, and you draw cards. You do lose the 1 life, which kind of sucks, but it's not the end of the world. Chains of Mephistopheles being out would suck for this, but it's a good way to filter through your list regardless. Asylum Visitor, a must. It's how you're going to find you really necropotence or ad nauseum to get the ball rolling here. Skeletal Scrying. For X and a black instant speed spell, as an additional cost to cast Skeletal Scrying, exile X cards from your graveyard. How about all the cards that we've been casting up into this point? This is a very spell slingy deck. There's a lot of cards just going into our graveyard. You draw X cards and you lose X life. A little cringy with the losing X life, but you're not going to do like X equals 10, okay? You're never going to go an absurd amount with this. At most, I would say that you're going to hit the 3 to 4 mark, right? You're going to cast this for ad nauseum's cost. You're going to get 3 to 4 cards and just replenish your hand before your turn, right? To give you the best odds of operating through the next turn. Again, there's no A plus B natural combo here that just wins on the spot. So you don't want to take too much of a hit off of this card, but it's a huge benefit with all of the discard you're doing. And speaking of benefit because of discard, Bag of Holding. 1 generic for an artifact. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. So if there's another, you can run cards like Planner Void in this. You choose, if you own the Planner Void, where the card goes. Put it in a bag of holding. For 2 generic and tap, draw a card, then discard a card. For 4 generic and tap, sacrifice bag of holding, return all cards exiled with bag of holding to the owner's hand. So this is ultimately your piggy bank for endgame, right? Even if you don't get the cards, like some guy's real smart, he uses his removal to get rid of this because there were 6 cards under it. Kind of understandable because it essentially operates as a pay 4, draw 6. Totally cool. You're choosing what goes in here though. You are choosing when you discard what goes in here. So, you know, you've done the Inquisition of Kozilek, right, on this guy. You know he has the Nature's Claim. Don't give him anything of value. It's totally fine if you lose bag of holding, but if it sticks, it's amazing. It's brilliant. This is one of the better payoffs. Easily better than Skeletal Scrying because you don't lose the life, but it will be a target. As soon as that bag gets fat, it will be a target. Next up on the list is Get's Grimoire, another staple in the discard utility bag. It is an artifact for 4 generic. Whenever an opponent discards a card from his or her hand, you may draw a card. Obviously, you want to land this relatively early. I don't recommend you hold off on casting discard cards until you have this out, right? Don't fear about losing out on the draw potential because you have Get's Grimoire in hand. Play it naturally. Don't hold off on playing other cards to benefit off of this. That's not how you play this. You have Tinybones out, right? You should have Tinybones out. That's your priority anyways. But this is just icing on the cake. It could be considered win more. I found that sometimes the 4 CMC is a lot, and it can be a negative in the list where I would have rather had just another discard effect in my hand at that point, or anything else really. But Get's Grimoire at 4, I would say is flexible, but certainly a staple if mass discard is your plan. Just depending on the speed of your opponent's list. Like there could be some games where they've gone off already and you just had Get's Grimoire in hand and you don't feel good about that. So maybe removal instead, depending on what your meta is, and or another piece of discard if you're truly relying on Tinybones. Bloodchief Ascension. For 1 black enchantment, at the beginning of each end step, and if opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief Ascension. You might be wondering to yourself, how are we doing that? We've certainly got ways to deal damage to them, and 2 damage at that, but fetch lands, shock lands, mana crypts, I mean, there are so many things dealing damage to our opponents turn after turn that this is usually going to fuel itself, particularly if you have this out early. But you do have ways to damage out the board beyond creatures with your enchantments and such that there are enough synergies to get this to go off. It's important that it goes off because whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, so if they mill, if they discard, battlefield to graveyard, doesn't matter. If it was put there, if Bloodchief's Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. Don't miss this trigger, right? Because it's a may. But don't miss it because you're going to want to gain 2 life. You want the life. That's more important than the 2 damage. Yes, War of Attrition, you're damaging the board and slowly working towards the end state here, which we'll talk about, but you want the life gain first and foremost for your Necropotence, for your Ad Nauseam. They're the core cards to many a mono black list. Go figure. Faith of the Devoted. I'm going to talk briefly on this and then I'll put a little rope around this and corral it back for the combo corner. This is the combo card. 2 generic, 1 black enchantment. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, that's what we're doing, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. A very familiar bit of text here. A lot of our cards operate that way. This is really good. Play it early, benefit off it early, continually pay the generic. It's always going to be worth it. Make sure it sticks. Folks aren't going to be too concerned about this because it's situational. It does nothing on its own. You have to pay the cost. But trust me, it's very important to the list. Liliana's Caress. For 1 generic, 1 black enchantment, whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. You don't gain 2 life for this one. Is the one downside of Liliana's Caress, but damn, that art's good. And damn, that's a great effect for 2 mana. Yes, you're going to want to play this. It's going to benefit you a lot in that War of Attrition. Quest for the Nihilstone. 1 black. I love how cheap these cards are. Well, they're all actually relatively cheap for monetary concerns and CMC wise. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may put a quest counter on Quest of the Nihilstone. That's easy. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand and Quest of the Nihilstone has 2 or more quest counters on it, you're really not even asking for a lot. You may have that player lose 5 life. That is 1/8 their starting total. Yeah, you take the prize, Nihilstone, you take the prize. You are truly a must in this list. Run it, play it, it's smart. This is the best enchantment for the deck though. This is the one that's going to help you propel your game forward severely. It's like, it puts you, if you're on turn 2 and you had this out with Tinybones and you had mana to cast a discard spell, you can easily go into turn 3 or 4 with your actions. Generic black enchantment. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie token. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, get 2 black in your mana pool. Whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, draw a card. What? 2 CMC. Best enchantment in the list? Best enchantment in the list. Don't really need to explain that one. Yeah, you're going to want to keep that one around. I talked about some flexible cards earlier. That one's not flexible. If there's a 1 CMC version of this card, play that one too. But don't replace it. You want both. Waste On is fantastic. Super cheap. I do foresee spikes though, depending on when you're watching this. I'm trying to put this out early so that the cards are still relatively affordable. Because trust me, a lot of the cards that you see come out for this, Tinybones is easily the most popular legendary from this set thus far. And the cards that are going to value off of it are going to go up in value and go up in cost. So trust me, waste not. Definitely want to put it in your arsenal beforehand. So we're not entirely without some form of combo in this list. As I like to do with all my lists, if you've ever watched any of my videos, I include a lot of infinite lines in my decks. And usually the video is a discussion on those infinite lines, but this one's odd in that it doesn't operate that way. This is the most abstract form of a competitive list because it doesn't operate on the standard methods of play. It's not adaptive, it's not proactive, and it's certainly not stacksy and or controlling in the same sense that a lot of other decks are. It benefits off discard, and the core combo just loves discarding. Specifically, loves it when you discard. I'm just going to read off the cards as I have them here, and then I'll explain through the loop. So you have Tinybones, Trinket Thief, and or Faith of the Devoted. I think Faith is better in this particular combo line, but with those 2 out, you'll cast Ad Nauseam and or Necropotence. The next card you're going to want to shoot for, and this is after you've Ad Naused or Necroed for a great deal of life. We want at least 20 cards in our hand, 20 plus cards in our hand to get the ball rolling. Next, if he isn't on the battlefield already, he or she, it isn't on the battlefield already, you're going to want to put Scourge Familiar down. What is Scourge Familiar? 4 generic, 1 black, summon Imp, 3/2 body, flying, choose and discard a card, add 1 black to your mana pool, play this as a mana source, so it doesn't use the stack. But essentially you get to, at cost, discard a card. How is this valuable? Well, if your opponents are hellbent, you can use Scourge Familiar alongside Tinybones to go ahead and make each opponent with no cards in hand lose 10 life. That is a lot of life. That is 1/4 of their life. And if we've been doing our job correctly, you shouldn't have to do this 4 times. As a matter of fact, with the amount of life they would have lost naturally and the life that you've been reducing them down to up until this point, you will likely only have to do this 3 times. At least that's the goal. And you should only have to discard 18 cards for that. Seems like a lot, but again, our CMC is low and we can draw a lot with either one of those 2 spells I mentioned. But more importantly, after you've Ad Naused and Necropotence, what if you have Faith of the Devoted out? Well, life gets even better because whenever you discard a card, you may pay 1. Well, guess what? Scourge Familiar is doing 2 things at once here. He is really raising his chalice and praising those horns at one time. I was trying to say two birds with one stone in a unique way, but anyways, when you discard the card, the trigger happens. Pay for it with the black mana you have. This will feed itself, and 2 life equates to 20 cards, right? So we want to discard down their life total. And this is very hard to interact with because I don't know that many people that run Stifle. So once you get this triggering, and even if they try to go to remove it at this point, you can just keep discarding cards with Scourge Familiar and adding this ability to the stack. Again, 20 cards maximum, but odds are likely they're not going to be at 40 life at this point. So you don't need to do 20 cards from your hand. It's more like 14 to 16. So not necessarily an infinite combo, but an enough combo. This deck can definitely get you there. If you draw a hand with, and I'm sure you're wondering why those, enchantments were in the list, the Animate Dead, the Dance of the Dead, Necromancy, it all makes sense now, right? When you get the Entomb from Ad Nauseam, go ahead and Entomb Scourge Familiar. Cast the Dance of the Dead. Begin this line of play. Again, feel the board out. If they're not hellbent, Tinybones isn't going to get you there. If you're feeling lucky and you think that you could just pull Faith of the Devoted from the top X cards once you go to Necropotence and or Ad Nauseam, go for it. If you had the mana, Skeletal Scrying might also be able to get you there. That's a lot of mana, but we've got Yawgmoth's Will, so it's not difficult to do. People will be swinging at each other. The meta is becoming increasingly more creature heavy. So if you're not the only target, trust me, because the Zur, the Kess, any other deck that's using black in a meaningful way with their life total is also going to be a target for attack. So it won't just be you swinging and taking damage. I do want to discuss one more playline that you could run in this list that will operate just as well with Faith of the Devoted and or your Tinybones. You can use Rings of Brighthearth. If you don't know what this is, it's a 3 generic artifact. Whenever you play an activated ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. So what are we going to use Rings of Brighthearth with? There are 2 lands that combo extremely well together in mono black, and those 2 lands are Cabal Coffers and Deserted Temple. Cabal Coffers reads 2 generic, tap, add 1 mana to your mana pool for each swamp you control. It doesn't have another ability beyond that, but if you have a lot of swamps, you're tapping for a lot of mana. Deserted Temple, on the other hand, has add 1 color's mana to your mana pool off the tap and or pay a generic, tap it, untap target land. That's the ability we want to copy. So in total, we need to be able to tap for at least 6 mana. Not difficult with Urborg out, but it is a stretch. However, this is a game of attrition, so we will get to those later stages of the game where this is possible. So again, 6 minimum swamps on the battlefield to be able to net infinite mana, right? So 1 to untap, 2 to copy the untap, 2 to do the Cabal Coffers again. You're always up 1 mana when you do this. You go up another 6, you're at 7, so on and so forth. So if the board is hellbent at this point, you can just go ahead and activate Tinybones indefinitely, right? And or you have the money for Faith of the Devoted, and you can use Gaia Reach Sanitarium alongside Deserted Temple in much the same manner. Tap it, everyone draws and discards a card, and then untap it to do it again. You have infinite mana. With Rings of Brighthearth, you can just do that indefinitely, right? So you could, with Faith of the Devoted, tap, untap, make everyone discard a card, activate Faith of the Devoted to do the damage. I think that this is a niche package that could be included and is very difficult to disrupt, right? I think Rings of Brighthearth is easily the most removable object in this combo line. However, it does require a lot of moving parts, and sometimes people do mainline, your Strip Mine and or anything that's going to stop the activated abilities of lands that aren't mana abilities. So I think on the whole, you're going to want to avoid this or any sort of infinite line with a higher costed creature, right? So if you want to add some sort of Razaketh line to this in mono black, you could, but it does take away from those ad nause piles, right? And we try to leverage Ad Nauseam and Necropotence to their fullest here so that you can fast track this list to get to going off with either one of those 2 cards, Faith of the Devoted or Tinybones. Again, there are different avenues of approach for this guy, but I do think that this is, in my opinion, a better version of it. And the version that I'm certainly going to be playing with moving forward. This is something I've wanted to do for such a long time, to accomplish a truly competitive worthy version of a mass discard list, and it's just lacked that draw component. You never made up for the cards you lost, and with Tinybones you do. And better yet, this card cares so little about artifact or enchantment removal, something that Mono Black has suffered from for so long, and it still suffers from it. There's no targeted removal, no decent targeted removal, Gate of Phyrexia. There's only so many cards I can fathom that really do help to remove the enchantment, remove the artifact that's holding you down. And this deck doesn't really care about it. This deck is really just trying to cast spells. And the only thing that really stops you from doing that are Rule of Law effects. Also, Cursed Totem. It will stop Tinybones. But trust me, if someone plays a Cursed Totem against you, instead of playing the other cards in their hand, well, they're going to be hellbent from here on out, and you're just going to make them lose very slowly. And that's on them. However, I do love that this list combats a lot of the issues Mono Black has in being a reanimator-centric strategy. You don't have to reanimate Scourge Familiar. You can just hard cast it in this list. I mean, we're relying on a 6 CMC activated ability from Tinybones to do damage from turn to turn. We can certainly afford to cast Scourge Familiar within that same time frame if push comes to shove, if we see the Graph Digger's Cage and we're not able to reanimate him. However, on the whole, this list is excellent. I can't wait to play more of it, and it's certainly the coolest Mono Black Legendary I've seen in a long time because it plays into a strategy that Black is very good at, and that is discard. Now guys, if you wanted to build a list similar to this, let me know. I'd love to see your take on Tinybones, and if you are acquiring cards for Tinybones, I'll highly encourage you to do so via the link in the description. Again, TCG Player has some of the best prices year-round and yearly kickback, so hold tight for that. Obviously, you can start to pre-order any of these cards from Core 2021 and or Jumpstart, where Tinybones is from TCG Player, and you're guaranteed the best prices. And if you buy it through the link in the description, you're helping out the channel, and I do appreciate that. But if you want to help us directly, you can do so via Anchor and or Patreon. And this is that part of the video where we talk directly to the patron. Can you hear my cat back there? Perfect timing. So guys, you're the best. Let me just start there. And I want to thank you so much for your support. These are really difficult times for a lot of people, and I really appreciate the show of support for this show when people just need entertainment or something to take their mind off of what's happening in the world. And the fact that you care enough about this channel, I'm not breaking up. My throat's very dry because I've had 3 espressos. I'm not about to cry, I promise. The fact that you're taking your time and money to watch this show and help it means a whole lot. So I do want to thank you a whole lot. Adam, Adrian, Ali, you make me hell-bent. That's a good thing. It's a good thing, trust me. Jarn, thank you for joining us over on Discord. Brendan, Bruno, the best players in Magic. I just saw them on the World Tour. Burton, Carl, Carlos, thank you guys so much. Christopher, Clyde, Corwin. Why I always pause with Clyde. Thank you so much. Are you guys playing The Last of Us 2? I'd love to hear from you if you are. I don't know. Okay. Craig, Dante, Dave, you can tell on my mind. Thank you so much. Is on Last of Us 2 came out it came out yesterday. No, it came out today. When I'm filming this, it came out today. And I really want to buy it. Let me know, Dave. Should I buy it? Frankly, Gregory, thank you so much. I suck at this part of the video. Gulius, Harry, Jake, thank you guys so much for your support. Jared, Jason, Javier, and Mace, I cry for your contrition. Jordan, Josh, M, Joshua, B. Distinguished you guys because you are unique. And I love you so much. Kevin B, and Kevin N, thank you so much for your support. Landers, Leon, Leonardo, and Luke. Please don't blackmail me. Mason, Matthew B, Ed Matthew K. You're like my Liliana's caress. Nathan, Nick, Oliver, Necrogen Spellbomb, only the top activated ability. Ever. Oliver? Did I stop with Oliver? I'm going to go Nathan, Nick, Oliver, Paul O, Paul G, and Paul O. What? Thank you so much. I don't know why I get so excited when we have people with the same name, but it does excite me. Renell, Running Red, Sam, Sarah, Shade. You guys are the best. Did you change your name? It says Shaded. Have I been reading it wrong? I'm sorry. Schmamby Tenenbaum. Sir Fluffykins. Shord. Submox1. Thank you so much for your support. Submox, your guy to go to if you need a full art foil Traneth Magistrate, by the way. The Holy Knight, Tim, Trent, and Xiao Fan, you are the faithful devoted. You are the combo enabler. And you're what makes Tinybones so great. You're what makes these Tinybones so great. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate you for it. I cannot wait to talk about Jumpstart moving forward. Expect it to, when this airs, it should be the next day. So expect a fun wrap up of Jumpstart tomorrow. But furthermore, if you have to watch this again today, enjoy it. Thank you guys so much. I'm Patrick Marlett, and happy brewing, babies.